Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing a bit of digital excavation. We're going to investigate the multi-layered artistry of 𝔟𝗯𝗡 and their incredibly cryptic transmissions from the future. We're looking at an artist whose work totally challenges how we consume digital media, identity, and honestly, just raw emotion. Let's get right into it.
You know that specific thrill of unearthing a ghost in the digital machine? Finding this music has been described as stumbling upon a smudge of charcoal on a pristine gallery wall. It's unpolished, it's immediate, and it feels way less like a commercial product and much more like a feverish, private data dump. Like stuff that wasn't necessarily meant for our eyes or ears.
Now, we're treating this explainer a bit like an internet detective story, because we're starting with a massive temporal anomaly. See, when we look at the metadata for this artist's releases, like the 𝔟𝗯𝔢𝔫 project, the music is actually post-dated to May 2026, which really forces us to ask, are we listening to a literal prediction, or are we just lagging behind the frequency this artist is already broadcasting on?
Section 1. A broadcast from 2026, Unearthing the Internet Archive.
Okay, so this mystery really starts taking shape when we look at our first major discovery in the digital sediment. The artist's digital footprint is, frankly, massive. They aren't just uploading songs, they're creating this totally fractured, genre-bending universe. We're finding lo-fi alternative rock fragments sitting right alongside incredibly heavy, esoteric texts like the 𝗏 Manifesto and Abraxas Prologue. The artist is basically blending audio and philosophy into one continuous, overwhelming transmission.
Moving on to Section 2, Decoding Visual Phonetics, the tracklist as a canvas. Now, what's really fascinating here is how 𝔟𝗯𝗡 literally weaponizes typography. They completely abandon standard English. This deliberate distortion of spelling forces us to read the vibe of the song before we've even hit play. Take a title like 𝒌𝗋𝗋, spelled with a K, a capital N, and a 0. That numerical substitution creates this clinical, digital native detachment. It completely bypasses your intellectual brain and speaks right to the subconscious. Their typographic toolkit is practically a secret language. They use spatial pacing, like the wide gaps in the word stay, to literally force the reader to slow down. They also integrate some heavy symbolic elements. I mean, look at their use of a rare punctuation mark, like an interrobang. You know, that combined question mark and exclamation point. That signals a frantic existential urgency. Every single character is curated. There are no accidents here. Let's look at exactly how this plays out on the 2025 album I Hate Love. By treating every character as a deliberate stroke of the brush, the tracklist actually becomes a psychological primer. The track Beat It uses punctuation to create a rhythmic, hard stop. Then, the elongated Y in the second track visually mimics the sound of a voice cracking with vulnerability. It perfectly prepares the listener for the exact emotional frequency of the entire album. All right, Section 3, the care package evolution, tracing the Beat It motif.
Let's look at how this builds a micro-narrative around a single obsessive musical cover found in a very specific geographical and temporal anchor. Back in early 2021, down in Florida, the artist curated a care package, but this wasn't your standard Spotify playlist. It was an emotional archive built almost entirely around endless covers and variations of the song Beat It by the late Lil Peep. This wasn't just stylistic experimentation. It's a ritualistic processing of trauma. It's a literal biography of a playlist, tracking an artist trying to fix a memory through relentless iteration.
And we can actually trace this descent into vulnerability hidden right in the metadata. The word beat slowly morphs over time. First, it's a distorted adaptation with diacritic marks. Then it shifts into bear, as in bearing a massive emotional burden. Finally, it just collapses into total exposure with bear me, in all caps. This proves the artist isn't just playing a song anymore. They are standing completely exposed, stripped of all artistic defenses. Which brings us to Section 4. Lo-fi defiance and cubism, shattering the digital persona.
Let's dive into how this raw exposure clashes with the digital masks we all wear, specifically during the artist's alternative rock era. Listen, or rather look at these fractured stream of consciousness lyrics from a 2026 alternative rock track. They interrogate the exhausting performance of the self. The audio is clipping, the distortion is heavy, and the artist is practically shouting at us about the faking and pretending that dominates our hyper-curated modern era. It's a super aggressive confrontation with inauthenticity. And here's where it gets really wild. 𝔟𝗯𝗡 elevates this project by directly invoking Picasso, even titling a track Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. Why? Because they're using lo-fi audio the exact same way Picasso used African masks in that famous painting.
to completely shatter the traditional perspective. The music essentially deconstructs the listener's ear to reveal a harsher, much more visceral truth beneath all the pretend.
As those intellectual masks are stripped away, the music shifts into these raw sensory experiences. We can literally see the mental haze of cognitive dissonance, described in the track as fog and ignorance, break down into a baptismal emotional release. The transition to the lyric, 𝗹-𝗯𝘂𝗋 on my cheeks, grounds the listener firmly in physical reality. The fog finally lifts, leaving only the cold sting of the truth.
Section 5. The Spiritual Transfiguration, when human language fails.
So what happens when personal endurance completely breaks down? What happens when music just isn't enough anymore? Well, when the pop culture processing of grief fails, the text shifts dramatically into the sacred. In their titles, the artist starts using ancient Aramaic for Jesus and Greek script for the mystical figure Abraxas. This signifies a major breaking point. The playlist ceases to be a musical archive and transforms into a raw, externalized prayer, desperately searching for an ancient foundation of comfort. Just look at the credits on the 2025 album Forgiveness for 𝗟-𝗯𝘂. This juxtaposition of messianic, mystical, and occult figures transforms the metadata itself into a chaotic spiritual reliquary. I mean, they are crediting Mary, Mother of God, right alongside Aleister Crowley on the exact same project. They're treating these figures not as historical ghosts, but as active, living collaborators in their healing process. The artist eventually explains this whole transition with a note left on SoundCloud. By gatekeeping their past music as holy work, the artist protects their metamorphosis. They essentially demand that we treat this transition into the stylized entity of 𝗟-𝗯𝘂 not as mere digital content to be quickly scrolled past, but as a deliberate, spiritual path to finding the divine within themselves. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to let this final thought linger. Through deliberate typography, lo-fi distortion, and deeply vulnerable spiritual archiving, 𝗟-𝗯𝘂 is asking us to strip away our own digital masks. In our pursuit of the perfect digital persona, have we forgotten how to stand unmasked in the rain? Think about how you're navigating your own vulnerabilities in the endless sediment of the internet. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep questioning the world around you and absolutely keep seeking the truth behind the screen.